Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Event Industry News Podcast with me, James Dickson, wishing you all a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever or wherever you tune into today's podcast from. And on today's podcast, we continue the discussion and the topic around the subjects of sustainability and event sustainability. Something that crops up regularly now on the podcast, which is no bad thing, considering that I think it's fair to say the more conversations we have around that type of subject, the better and the more improvement we can hopefully drive within the wider industry. And I'm going to be joined today by a guest who is actually in the thick of an event at the moment, working as the sustainability lead, I think I'm right in saying, and my guest will clarify that when we meet them in just a second. So not only is it a sustainability conversation, but it's a sustainability conversation with somebody who is really very much at the heart of things as we record today's episode. So I'm delighted to say that the founder and the event sustainability director of World's Better, Chrissie Beck, joins us today. Chrissie, good afternoon and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, James. It's great to be here.
Your background is very much in the industry, with agencies, with event production and event delivery. And so I'm guessing, and I'm hoping that you're going to say that, those experiences led you to launching and founding World's Better.
Absolutely. Yes. I delivered events for 20 years. I delivered events all over the world for 20 years. So I worked agency side, I did some supplier side work, I worked in-house, I worked at companies like Virgin, I also worked at Shell, and did that for 20 years. And towards the end of that 20-year stint, it just started to break my heart how unsustainable the events industry was, regardless of where you were working, whether you were, the client, an agency, or a supplier. I just didn't see sustainability being considered enough and moving fast enough within our industry. And so I decided to get myself trained up. I took loads and loads of courses, as many as I could possibly find, some in the events industry and some just sustainability in general. And I then decided to quit my job in delivering events, and I set up World's Better, which was a big risk, but I did it, and that was 2 years ago. And we have grown from just me in my spare room in my house to a team of very soon to be 7, which is wild. And we do lots of amazing work with lots of amazing clients. So it's all event industry focused. That's my speciality because of my background. But we do lots of work with agencies, whether that's writing a sustainability strategy, doing their carbon emissions calculations as a business or for specific events. We do certifications from an organisational level, so ISO 14001, ISO 2012-1 from an organisational level. We help with B Corp, we help with other things like EcoVadis, and as well as that, we do kind of project-specific sustainability consultancy. So like on the project I'm working on at the moment up here in Oxford as a sustainability lead on a project that takes place, either from, it could potentially be a year on some longer projects we've worked on, all the way down to, a quick turnaround over 6 or 5 months. As well as that, we deliver a lot of training. So I'm really, really passionate about training. I truly believe that training is incredibly empowering and supports our industry to transition towards that sustainable future that I really want for us all. By me hopefully transferring my passion for sustainability in events and, them catching it and being able to transfer it then to the events that they deliver and potentially other people in their team, that has a real opportunity to just grow and to impact our industry more and more as time goes on. So personally, I love training. We deliver a lot at World's Better. And yes, we now have gone from just me to a team of 6, and we've worked on some incredible projects. So, I've mentioned we're working on European Political Community Meeting at the moment. We worked on COP28, supporting one of our clients' identity. We do quite a lot of work with in-house corporate event teams. So we worked with HP Industrial to do a lot of measurement of some of their trade show activations to then look at how they might be able to improve their performance. We've done lots of incredible work with lots of wonderful clients.
And I guess you have to, I suppose, keep a finger on the pulse of all elements of the industry in order to be able to then translate that into advice, guidance, training, etc., etc. So not just working with clients, organizers, and agencies who maybe organize events, but presumably you have to have contact with suppliers in the industry and other facets of it in order to have an idea of what they're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. Everyone in the team comes from an event industry background, so we all know and understand it. Some of us have come from agencies, some from corporate, some from supplier, but understanding the industry is so important to what we do. Sustainability is a very important subject, but for our industry in particular, it's really challenging because the event industry touches so many industries, touches construction, it touches transport, it touches agriculture, and you're kind of bringing a little bit of each of those into everything that you're doing. And as well as that, currently there's not really very much mandatory legislation to enforce our industry to be doing anything in particular. So everyone's kind of either trying to do something and trying to align it with, something like GHG protocol or an ISO standard, which is great. But also, there's nothing mandatory really. So everyone's just kind of doing lots of different things. And also, like you might expect in this industry, there is still a little bit of competitiveness, which agencies are see each other as competitors, right, which makes sense. But in a sustainability respect, that's not, in my personal opinion, I don't think sustainability should be about competition. It should be about collaboration and about open source sharing information with each other so that the whole industry can move together towards that sustainable future.
It's the collaborative approach again is something that we talked about on the podcast. It's been spoken about, very much at the inaugural Event Sustainability Live event last year, and that continuing and ongoing collaboration is important. And one thing that I mentioned on the podcast just recently with another guest about the subjects of sustainability is that this, in relative terms, the subject of event sustainability and it being its own sort of sector, if you will, is still relatively new. It's still relatively in its infancy, and we're at a level yet that without longevity in anything, you don't develop expertise. And so are we genuinely at a level yet where we are, is anybody arguably an expert in the subjects of sustainability? We have people like yourself who have a very, very good foothold in it and are able to guide and advise. But I think until we've built records up and working practices over a prolonged period of time, we don't sort of truly know and can't reflect on what we should and shouldn't be doing. So I think that collaborative approach, while it's still in its infancy, is absolutely critical in order to give us a bigger overview of how much of an impact we're making. Because a lot of people will say on the sustainability front, well, what impact can I make? What impact can me as a freelancer make on a day-to-day basis? What could I be doing to actually have a meaningful impact? And I think if everybody does adopt the right attitude, it's that collaborative approach will have an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I genuinely couldn't agree more. It's a complex subject. So I think because no one at the moment has to do anything, and because it's quite complicated and people are so worried about getting something wrong, it kind of puts people off having a go. And from I think, hang on, I lost my point there. You can cut this bit out,
Well, no,
hopefully.
I'm gonna dive in and I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna give you a real world scenario. We don't have to cut that because I was about on the tip of my tongue was a real world scenario that I want you to either laugh at and say that I'm stupid, or actually say you might be onto something there. When I work on an event site, the nature of what I do as a freelancer means that I'm never ever without 2 rolls of electrical tape in my pockets, right? Grey and black. usually. Okay. And I use it to neaten up cables that are dangling behind TVs on stands. I use it to wrap cables that go back in flight cases. I use it to attach, an HDMI converter to the back of a lectern. I'm never ever without my 2 rolls of electrical tape in my pockets, because it does everything. And anyone that works in AV or event production will say the same thing. And I worked out I'd probably go through about 40 rolls of it a year. And it's little, usually about 3-inch, 4-inch sections at a time, that when it gets finished, gets just broken off, screwed into a ball, and usually just sort of thrown in a bin and lobbed on a floor. And that's all plastic tape. Now, what was my point about, as one man, what difference can I make? If I could get that down to 20 rolls a year, and
Yeah,
everybody that does that job the same as me can half the amount of tape that they're using, how much plastic would we actually stop going into landfill?
yeah,
And I said, a lot of people may laugh at me listening to this, thinking, what difference does a few inches of plastic tape make? But it's that economies of scale. If everybody did it across the world in the AV industry, how much plastic could we save every year? And I think, from a personal level, I think it's little things like that that we could be doing and looking at on a day-to-day operational basis that would actually, over a prolonged period, have an impact.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think, if someone came to you and educated you on, here's an alternative type of tape you can use, or here's a new technique that you can use for taping your cables down, that education piece that you might not have even known about is a key part of kind of transitioning and changing your behavior.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you, I have made a positive step in that direction, because there's one
Mm,
event I work on every year, and it's in an arena, and it's for primary schools, and it's for their end of year sort of school concerts where the classes have been learning instruments, and we deal with about 1,600 children over the course of 3 days and 6 concerts, and it requires miles and miles of cable, all run in straight lines that we have to tape down. And so it's actually the biggest consumer of tape in my calendar year, is that one event over 3 days, and 4.5 days on site. And so I came off site this year, and I looked up this Velcro matting, because it's a kind of really rough carpeted arena floor that stays on all the time. And you can buy this reusable matting that will do exactly the job I need it to do, but
there you
at the
go.
I can just tear it up, roll it up into a nice neat roll, pop it in a flight case, and it will come out for the following year and do exactly the same job without tearing all that tape up and just throwing it away.
Yeah,
And it's required a little bit of investment. It's not cheap to buy, 300 meters of the stuff that I need, but it will then probably get used for another 10, 15 years on site.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, and I think, small steps like that, if people just look at little things like that, I think it can make a big difference.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, it's an interesting one. Tell me, on the training front, um, again, you're stepping into a sector that I said is still relatively in its infancy. So, how much development, adjustment, tweaking went into the training elements of your business before you were happy that, actually, no, we can go and actually deliver some meaningful training to people? Or, what was the process like of actually developing training, presumably from scratch?
So, to begin with, I made sure that we were fully educated and understood sustainability, ESG, carbon emissions, reporting legislation, all the kind of the top line foundational pieces of information that you need to know working as a sustainability consultant. Um, and then I started applying all of that learning to the events industry. So thinking about how, what practices event managers can apply that help, you know, reduce material use, or help reduce emissions from catering, or help reduce emissions from transport, and just started to kind of put the two together. And back when I first started, I did some work with Isla, and when I was working with Isla, I was helping to build out their training modules. And I think that's where my love for training ignited. And I think working with event managers who are really passionate about sustainability, you can see where uh, where where they're kind of joining the dots as well, where they can go, oh,
Yeah.
okay, there's lots of opportunities here that I hadn't really thought about. And now I think event managers know that sustainability is important, right? We all do, the whole industry does. But yet, you've said it yourself, we seem to be quite early on in this journey, but we've known sustainability is important for quite a long time.
Mhm.
And I think, the training part of our business is about trying to encourage existing event managers to learn more, to be able to speed up delivery of sustainable events, because at the moment it feels like having a sustainability lead on a project like myself at the moment is a nice to have, whereas we're going to end up moving towards a future of there will always be a sustainability lead on a project, like there is always, especially a large one, there is always a health and safety manager. There will always be someone that represents sustainability. And so in response to this, event managers know that
Yeah.
sustainability is important. They often feel like they don't have the skills or knowledge or education to know what to do and how to do it. We have developed a comprehensive training course in partnership with the Event Academy. And this course is 60 learning hours, 60. So it's a very comprehensive course. It's not a degree or a master's, and it's not a kind of one day flash in the pan course. It's
Mhm.
something in the middle. So it's comprehensive, where it's looking at, the foundational knowledge I talked about earlier. What is sustainability? What is ESG? What is the triple bottom line? It then looks at climate change and carbon literacy, the real why of why are we doing this. This is why, because we're in a crisis here. And then it looks into what that all means for the event industry. So it looks at what environmental sustainability practices are for live events, looks at social, looks at economic practices, looks at governance. And then we kind of go into how you would measure the impact of your events, not just carbon emissions, but looking at how do you measure social value, and
Yeah.
how do you measure the economic value. An event, think about the Paris Olympics. There are so many thousands of people going to the city of Paris that has a significant economic impact, with all those people, all those suppliers spending money and making money in that city. So we teach about measurement. We teach about a sustainable supply chain. So how you can vet your suppliers that you use and ensure that they have considered sustainability for their own business. And we look at other things. Sustainability, yes, all of that foundational knowledge is important, but often you are met with lots of challenges. You're met with lots of pushback. You're trying to influence behavior change. You might be
Sure.
trying to convince your client or your supply chain to think about something differently. So we arm you with lots of cases for why it's important to do this and why it's important to do that, and trying to influence behavior change and problem solve. Go on, sorry.
And I was going to ask, have you ever been met with a scenario where, in terms of vetting suppliers and making sure
Mhm.
that they are, you know, batting on the same, or on the same page as the organizer? Have you ever been faced with a scenario whether you've got a supplier actually where you think these are not the right fit, these are not doing what they want to do, but the organizer wants to go with them maybe because from a budgetary point of view they're better? Is that a scenario that has cropped up?
Yes, it is a scenario that crops up. And I think it really depends on how forceful you want to be, how genuinely sustainable you want to be as that event organizer.
Mm.
I'd say if you're at the beginning of that journey, then what we teach in the course is to go, what do you want out of this? Do you want to ensure that in the next 2, 3, 5 years, you have a set of suppliers that and can trust are fully sustainable? Or do you want to start that journey really, really slowly and say to your suppliers, this is what the expectation is going to be in the next 2 years, the next 3 years, the next 5 years. By the 10th year of us working together, I want you to be a sustainable supplier. You can kind of set those targets for as near or as long term as you really like. Depends on how kind of forceful you want to be. I mean, an example is, and this I think comes partly with mandatory legislation. So you'll find a lot of blue chip clients, you know, tech, a lot of finance clients, they have to report. They have to report their carbon emissions for reporting legislation. And so we are starting to see that the events industry cascading down to us as suppliers and us as, you know, delivering events for them, in the form of, if you want to work with us, you need to do X, Y, and Z. You need to have this certification. You need to provide us with your calculation data. And that is all because they're now having to do X, Y, and Z to comply with mandatory legislation. And over time, that is what's going to happen to everyone, every single type of client, right? And it's complicated, and you're seeing quite a lot of businesses that are sort of panicking and going, oh, okay, I've got to do this now. But actually, if everyone started to think about it and implement it into their own supply chain now, and kind of set that, okay, in the next 2 years, we want to be here, in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years, we want to be here, and just start to introduce it and build it up, then it'll be a lot easier when that gets enforced at some point in the near future.
And this highlights, and you've emphasised a point that's been made widely, which is that there was an expectation or a thinking amongst some event organisers that, oh crikey, next year I need to completely be net zero, and next year I need to be completely like this, and suddenly within 12 months I need to completely reinvent my event so that it's completely sustainable. And that's just never going to happen. It's unachievable. And everybody just calm down a second. And what you've just said emphasizes that point and highlights it further, that there has to be a roadmap. There has to be a short, medium, and long-term goal strategy set out, because
Yeah.
it's not something that could be achieved overnight. And those people that were panicking, thank you for doing so, and thinking, oh great, but I need to make changes next year. You can't do that.
Yeah, and you know, my advice for those types of businesses, or for any business, is to not make any net zero claims without doing your calculations, and even having a couple of years calculations to see where your emissions are going. There are I see it all the time, people making big claims on their website about becoming net zero by 2025, 2030, and they haven't even measured a baseline year. People don't understand it, I don't think, and they're either going out there and making greenwashing claims, or there's another term which you might have heard, James, called green hushing, where they're
No, pray
green.
tell.
Pray tell. Green hushing is where companies don't say anything about what they're doing for fear of it not being correct. So, or either they're not doing anything, or they're doing something and they're not saying it outwardly because they're worried about it being incorrect or taken
Interesting.
wrong.
Yeah.
So it is almost a form of greenwashing. And if you're going to make, and we talk about in the course that we're writing, we have a module on how to avoid greenwashing, and how to tell stories from your data and from your learnings from the sustainability project. And you know, it's about having data to back up any claims you make, whether that's a net zero claim, whether that's a carbon neutrality claim, whether that's any claims. You have to have data to back it up. If you don't, then it's absolutely greenwashing. And you know, if you're green hushing, you might have lots of lovely data, but you're not saying anything about it. So you can see why people get a bit nervous, because you've got to get the
Absolutely. Yeah.
balance right, you know.
Yeah, there's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of
Yeah.
scenario where, that maybe people want to do it, but they haven't got the stats or the figures or the the data, like you said, to actually back it up. But similarly, then, is there anything wrong with the company publicly saying, look, we're striving to make a difference at the moment and change things, but like a lot of businesses, we're in a bit of a minefield and we're not quite sure how to do it. But while we're figuring that out, here's some of the things that we are trying to do a bit better.
Yeah.
I personally, I don't see anything wrong with that sort of broad statement. Say we're trying, but we're still figuring it out.
Yeah. But your problem is competitiveness. So there might be someone out there that's being really open, really honest, and we're not doing everything, but this is what we are doing. But then you might get people that come along and go, oh, we're doing everything in the world, and they're kind of looking at what everyone else is doing, and all the people that are being totally honest and making all of these big bolshy claims that aren't happening.
Which forces
Yeah,
competitors, I guess that forces competitors then to say, oh, crikey, they're saying all of this and they're giving out all this data. We need to be trying to do something similar to stay on a competitive footing with them.
yep, exactly.
It is a scenario, but going back to the points that we've made a few times in this, only goes will only improve with collaboration.
Absolutely. Yeah. Collaboration is the key. And, I think there's going over the next kind of 6 months, there's a few projects that we're working on where we really want to try and bolster collaboration in our industry. This course is a really key part of that. I think not only are we going to try and educate our cohorts on exactly what to do, but we're really keen to ensure that they have practical application throughout the course of what they're learning. So
Sure.
it's not just a kind of, here's a video, watch that, let's do a quick workshop. It's that, but it's also, okay, think about how you can apply what you've learned to your specific role, your specific industry. And we do 9 weeks of learning with about 3 hours every week. And then on the 10th week, we all meet up face to face. And in that session, there's an opportunity for collaboration with your peers to learn from each other and to kind of
Mhm.
share challenges and solutions and to genuinely collaborate. And also in that kind of week, face-to-face week, we take them and do a sustainability audit together. So we go to an event, we walk
Right.
around, and I kind of teach them what they should be looking out for and run through a checklist and make
Brilliant.
sure they know
Yeah.
exactly, putting all the learnings that we've taught them from the first 9 weeks and putting it in practical application.
The perfect sort of segue, looking at the time and as we start to wrap up today's episode, tell us a bit more about how people can actually get in touch and inquire about that course, find out more about it. If anybody's listening today and thinks that sounds just the thing for me, how do they find out a bit more about it?
So I will give you a website which you'll be able to see with this podcast. And if you visit the website, then there'll be everything that you need on there. Also,
Mhm.
you can visit the World's Better website, which is just worlds-better.co.uk, and there'll be a page on there about the course. You can learn a bit more about the learning outcomes, when the first cohort starts, how much it costs. But genuinely, this course is a huge labour of love for me. I genuinely love training. I can see it helping to transition the industry towards a more sustainable future. And I'm really excited about it and hope that the rest of the industry is too.
Well, stay in touch, and we'd love to sort of get the feedback and your sort of thoughts, after that sort of first course, or that course is finished, and it would be great to find out a little bit more about it, once it's run, and find out what tweaks, adjustments, how things are going to develop from there. As a sort of footnote to that collaborative approach that the industry is being prompted to take at the moment. Similarly, it's important that as a media outlet we find out and keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening with developments like this. So it's not just about sort of coming on now and saying this is what we are going to do. It's about speaking to you after that process as well and saying, look,
Yeah.
what was learned, what will be changed, what can be improved on. So yeah, do stay in touch and keep us in the loop with how things are developing.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much, James. Thanks for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. We've been talking today on the podcast to Chrissie Beck, who is the founder and the event sustainability director at World's Better. And as we said, worlds-better.co.uk is their website if you want to go and find out a bit more about what Chrissie and the team are up to there. And just while we're on the subject of websites and pointing people in the right direction, you may be listening to this podcast today via your podcast platform. If you are, thank you very much for tuning in today. But please don't forget to head over to eventindustrynews.com, where you can find video versions of all of our podcasts, as well as the A to Z supplier directory. If you work in the events industry and you're looking for a supplier or a service or a contractor of any description, the chances are you will find it tucked away on the A to Z supplier directory within eventindustrynews.com, where of course you can find all the latest news, features, special supplements, all that good stuff. A little bit of a shout out for the Sustainable Event Buyer's Guide, which was launched earlier this year. So the 2024 edition is available via eventindustrynews.com. Just search for the Sustainable Buyer's Guide. And of course, submissions are open for Event Sustainability Live and for Event Tech Live London, which takes place in November. The second edition of Event Sustainability Live returning to Excel in November alongside Event Tech Live. If you've got a session idea, a topic that you think should be discussed as part of the conference program there, submissions are open, so please do visit the websites for Event Sustainability Live and Event Tech Live if you've got a session idea that you would like to put to us. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening today, and thanks again to my guest Chrissie Beck for joining us and taking the time out of a very busy schedule of and a very busy event week for joining us. Chrissie, it's been great to talk to you.
Thanks again, James. Thanks for having me.
And we'll see everybody on the next edition. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.